Hey everyone, it's Jana from The Last Stitch. In today's video, I will talk about a topic that I'm sure a lot of us have on our mind, namely, how do I organize my sewing space and find a good place for all those things? Because as we all know, sewing notions, sewing tools, fabric, all that stuff, they tend to expand a lot. So in today's video, I will share my top tips for how to organize your sewing space, even if your space is not very big.
Tip number 1. Use small plastic boxes or dividers to keep track of your buttons. I use these both to separate them between different colors and also different types. So this system is also excellent if you have, say, washers, eyelets and grommets and you need to keep them apart. This is also really useful for rivets, all that good stuff. I found my plastic boxes in a hardware store, and the best thing is that they actually have the same proportions as the mini cabinet called Moppe from Ikea that I use for lots of my sewing storage. So that is an added bonus, but regardless of what system you have, using some type of dividers or small boxes is really great for keeping your buttons nice and organized. Tip number 2, label everything. Now, I'm a big fan of not having to think too much when it comes to organizing, because as soon as I need to think, that's where the mess happens. So I have labeled pretty much every little drawer, little box, everything that I use for my sewing organizer. And I actually just use one of those Dymo label makers, the retro style, but you can use any type of label maker. So I'm a big fan of labeling as much as you possibly can to just make organizing so much easier. Tip number 3. Wrap your elastics around pieces of cardboard. This is something I've done recently, but what I did was that I just cut little pieces of cardboard that I had in my recycling box, and I just wrapped all the elastic around that, and now I keep them in track using a pin. If you want to be even more thorough, you can of course also label them and perhaps even measuring them. But for me, this was a good start because I just felt that I just needed a way of simply and inexpensively just getting sure that my elastic is in order. So it's just not a big jumble of mess, which was the case for me, but now not anymore. Tip number 4. Now, one of my biggest organizing struggle has been keeping track of my sewing machine needles. It's just so hard. I've tried so many systems and I still have no idea which needle goes where, how long I've been using them, which one are active, which one are fresh. So after a lot of thinking, I've now come up with a system that I will say is not perfect, but it's the best one so far. So I just use a little plastic box with dividers, and then I labeled everything. So I have a section for jeans needles, I have a section for stretch needles, I have a section for serger and cover stitch needles, I have a section for microtex needles, etc., etc. So I have a clear box where all the boxes for each needle will go. So again, I don't have to think about it. I just drop it in the right spot. And I also wanted to have a system to keep track of the needles that are currently in use. So what I did is that I placed strips of magnetic tape outside the corresponding box of the needle. And I also put numbers, so I have like size 70, 80, 90, and I'm sure that I might find something even better, and I'd love to hear your solutions, but just labeling everything, again, having a clear spot for each little thing just makes organizing our sewing stuff so much easier. Tip number 5. If I like a pattern a lot and I know that I will use it over and over again, I like to transfer the pattern to stiffer paper just so that I can reuse it over and over again. Luckily, I have a system from the British vendor called Morplan. It's a really nice system designed for the garment industry, and it has a removable hanger, and there you have little tiny holes that you place the metal hangers for each pattern, and you can also write down on the paper what type of pattern each corresponding hanger is. So this is a really nice system. It takes also hardly any space, which is a great bonus. I recommend that you use one of those hangers that squeezes garments together, such as the ones you use for pants and skirts. So you could just insert the pattern, flip it over, and then you can just hang it on a regular rack. So I used that method before I got the Morplan one. And these nice wooden hangers I got from Ikea as well. Not very expensive at all. I'm sure you can find it in charity shop as well. So that's a really good option if you are not able to find a system like the Morplan one. Tip number 6. Another way that I use the Moppe Mini Cabinet from Ikea is that I also use it for thread storage. And for those regular sewing machine spools, they are actually the perfect height for the small drawer of the Moppe cabinet. So what I've done, and this is very unconventional, but I did a very simple, it's not pretty, but it's really effective. I just drew tons of nails from the bottom up. So now I just have a bunch of nails that I just place the thread spool on. And this actually helps me to keep them really organized. The drawback that I discovered was that the nails had a tendency of sort of pushing back and getting stuck in the drawer underneath the thread drawer. I've actually solved this very simple method, which is that I use duct tape to just keep the head of the nails in place and keep them from slipping down. And yes, this is not a pretty solution, but it's a really fast and easy way. Tip number 7. And speaking of Ikea, also invested in their custom pegboard system called Skådis. This has been such a nice addition to my sewing space. The reason why I picked that one instead of a regular pegboard and do it yourself is that the Ikea Skådis has lots of great hangers, boxes, shelves, so many things that you can use to store your things. But here I hang a lot of my tools. I really like the system where you can place your sewing manuals and notebooks. I also use them to hang my rulers and my rotary cutters and some other things as well. It just works so well, and it's so flexible and really easy to change around and make storage very much a breeze, which is something I really appreciate. Tip number 8. If you follow me on my channel and my blog, you know that I'm a big fan of pattern magazine, but pattern magazines, well, that collection can get a little bit out of hand. So what I've done is that I've actually placed the magazine in binders using plastic folders. So I just label each binder with perhaps a year or 2 year, depending on how many magazines I bought that year. And then I just use one plastic folder for the actual magazine and one plastic folder for the patterns. And that way, it just makes it really easy to access them. Of course, you can be much more ambitious with it, but this is, again, one of those systems that I really like because it's very easy to set up, and it also is like a no-brainer because now I know pretty much straight away where I can find them. I also try to keep them in a chronological order inside each binder, just to make it even easier to find them. So if you are struggling with pattern magazines and keeping all the stuff together, I recommend that you try to use the binder system combined with those plastic folders.
So these were some of my top tips for organizing the sewing space. Now I'm really curious to know, what are your ways of keeping everything nice and organized? Because this is definitely a process, and I love that we can learn from each other. I've gotten so many tips from you guys, and I hope that I also can pass along some of my best tips. So please share in the comment section, and if you like this video and want to see more, please subscribe for weekly sewing videos. You know what, you can also check out my website, thelaststitch.com, where I have done lots of blog posts about all this particular topic, how to organize your sewing space. Anyways, stitch safe, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye!